Imagine a perfect world. Close your eyes and really picture it. A world where you never have to work another day in your life. A world where you never feel the sharp pang of hunger, where the temperature is always exactly right, and where you are entirely safe from violence, disease, and predators. A world where every single physical need you have is met, effortlessly, forever. It is the oldest dream of human civilization. We have spent thousands of years building walls, inventing medicines, and fighting the elements, all in the desperate hope of one day reaching absolute paradise. But there is a catch, a terrifying, scientifically documented catch. If you actually achieve this paradise, if you actually remove all the struggle, all the friction, and all the danger from a society, you do not get a utopia. You get a countdown to extinction. We know this because we built it. We built paradise, and it killed everyone inside it. This is the story of Universe 25. And once you understand what happened inside it, you will never look at your own life, your own city, or your own comforts the exact same way again. In the late 1960s, an American ethologist named John B. Calhoun set out to answer a question that had been haunting him for his entire career. What happens to a society when nothing is hard anymore? Calhoun was a scientist obsessed with population dynamics. He had spent decades building enclosures for rats and mice, studying how they behaved when confined to specific spaces. He ran 24 previous experiments, 24 different miniature worlds, and in every single one, he watched the same dark pattern unfold. A population boom, a spike in violence, a collapse of social order, and finally, death. But critics always had notes. They argued the enclosures were too small, or the food wasn't distributed properly, or diseases had skewed the data. So, for his 25th attempt, Calhoun decided to silence the critics forever. He secured a massive space inside a rural facility for the National Institute of Mental Health in Maryland. And there, he built the ultimate utopia, the perfect world. He called it Universe 25. It was a brilliant piece of engineering. A 9-foot square enclosure featuring walls lined with a complex grid of mesh tunnels. These tunnels led to 256 individual nesting boxes, which Calhoun called walk-up apartments. The environment was pristine. The temperature was perfectly regulated at an ideal 70 degrees. There were 16 massive food hoppers and 16 water dispensers scattered throughout the city, carefully designed so that no single mouse could ever hoard resources. The cages were meticulously cleaned by human researchers on a strict schedule. There were no cats. There were no traps. There was no freezing winter rain. There was a dedicated team of veterinarians ensuring that absolutely no diseases entered the colony. By Calhoun's careful calculations, Universe 25 could comfortably house 3,800 mice. In July of 1968, Calhoun selected 8 founders, 4 males and 4 females. They were the absolute healthiest, most genetically flawless mice he could find. He placed them into the enclosure, and he shut the lid. Phase 1 was the adjustment period. For the first 104 days, the 8 founders simply explored their new paradise. They sniffed the mesh tunnels. They found the food hoppers. They realized the water would never run out. They carved out territories, paired off, and built their nests. It was peaceful. Then came Phase 2, the Golden Age. With unlimited calories and 0 threats, the population exploded. Every 55 days, the number of mice in Universe 25 doubled. First there were 20, then there were 40, then 100, then 300. Life was effortless. The mice were healthy, the litters were large, and the early generations experienced a level of luxury and safety that no wild mouse in the history of the planet had ever known. They ate, they slept, they bred, and they thrived. By day 315, the population crossed 600, and this is the exact moment the utopia began to crack. In a normal, wild environment, When a mouse population grows too large for a specific area, the younger mice simply leave. They emigrate. They strike out into the forest or the fields, face the dangers of the world, and establish new territories of their own. But in Universe 25, there was nowhere to go. The walls were absolute. Even though the enclosure had enough physical space, enough nesting boxes, and enough food for over 3,000 mice, the social space had completely run out. Every single meaningful role in the society, every alpha position, every territory, every prime nesting spot, was already occupied by an older, healthy mouse that wasn't dying. Because there were no predators, the older generation just kept living. This created a massive, lost generation of young mice who had no purpose. They had no roles to fill. They had no territory to claim. So, they broke. The first to collapse were the young males. Unable to find a place in the social hierarchy, they retreated physically and psychologically. They abandoned the mesh tunnels and the apartments and began gathering in the large, open center of the enclosure. Calhoun watched as hundreds of these males simply gave up. They formed massive, listless pools of bodies, just lying on the floor in the center of the room. They had unlimited food just a few feet away, but they did almost nothing. They had no females to court. They had no borders to patrol. If one of these dropouts was attacked by another mouse, he wouldn't even fight back. He would just lie there, absorb the bites and scratches, stand up, walk 2 feet away, and lie right back down. Their spirits had simply snapped. But not all the males went quiet. A second group reacted to the lack of roles with pure, unhinged chaos. These were the hyperactive, ultra-violent mice. They moved erratically. They completely ignored the complex social rituals that usually govern mouse society. Instead of courting females, they pursued them aggressively and relentlessly. They mounted other males. They forced their way into heavily guarded nests, not to conquer territory, but just to disrupt it. They were restless, violent, and completely detached from the rules of their own species. Meanwhile, the females were experiencing their own psychological collapse. In a functioning mouse society, males patrol the borders of a territory, keeping threats away so the nursing mothers can safely raise their pups inside the nests. But in Universe 25, the alpha males were completely exhausted. They were constantly fighting off the endless waves of wandering, purposeless young males. Eventually, the alphas just stopped defending their homes. This forced the mothers to become the defenders, and the stress broke them. The nursing females became hyper-aggressive. They started viewing everything as a threat, including their own families. They turned on their own young. They would violently kick their pups out of the nests before they were even weaned. Mothers would pick up a pup, carry it halfway across the enclosure, drop it on the floor, and just walk away, forgetting it entirely. In the darkest corners of Universe 25, mothers began eating their own offspring. Even though the food hoppers were completely full, right outside the door. In some sectors of the enclosure, infant mortality reached 96%. Almost no new mice were surviving. Calhoun called this total collapse of social norms the behavioral sink. The mice became so pathologically warped that they forgot how to act like mice. They developed a bizarre, compulsive need to be surrounded by others while eating. Even though there were 16 food hoppers, the mice would crowd violently around just 2 or 3 of them, trampling each other to get to the food, while the other hoppers sat completely empty. They had lost the ability to eat alone. By this point, Calhoun noted, the society was functionally dead. The bodies were still breathing, but the structure that made them a species had evaporated. And then came the final phase. The most terrifying development of the entire experiment. The pups that somehow managed to survive this nightmare grew up in a world with no functional adults. They had never seen a normal courtship ritual. They had never seen a mother protect a nest. They had never seen a male establish a territory. When this new generation reached adulthood, they did something that chilled Calhoun to the bone. They did nothing. They didn't fight. They didn't claim territory. They didn't chase females. They didn't attempt to mate. They withdrew completely from the social fabric of Universe 25. They moved into the highest, most isolated nesting boxes. They woke up, they walked to the food hoppers when they were empty, they ate, they drank, and they went back to sleep. And in their waking hours, they did only one thing. They groomed themselves, obsessively. Calhoun named them the beautiful ones. Because they never got into fights, their bodies were completely unscarred. Because they never mated or raised young, they experienced no physical stress. Their fur was thick, lush, and pristine. They looked, from the outside, like the absolute peak of health, the most perfect specimens of the species. But inside, they were blank slates. They were biologically capable of reproduction, but they had absolutely no psychological programming that told them how to do it. They were completely devoid of the social behaviors that define their species. They were physically alive, but psychologically dead. On day 560, the population of Universe 25 peaked at 2,200 mice. It never reached the 3,800 capacity it was built for. It would never grow again. The last successful conception inside the utopia occurred on day 920. After that, birth stopped entirely. The society entered a permanent, irreversible decline. The violent males died off. The aggressive mothers died off. All that was left were the beautiful ones, sitting in their high apartments, perfectly groomed, waiting for the end. On May 23, 1973, 4 years and 10 months after the experiment began, the last mouse in Universe 25 died. Total extinction. In an environment with unlimited food, water, and safety. When Calhoun published his findings, the public panicked. The metaphors were too obvious to ignore. Sociologists, politicians, and religious leaders latched onto Universe 25 as a prophecy of our own doom. They looked at the rapid urbanization of the 1970s, the crowding of cities, the rise of the welfare state, and the booming global population, and they declared that humanity was heading for the exact same collapse. People read the experiment as proof that overpopulation would kill us, that abundance would destroy us, that a comfortable life is a toxic life. But that is not what Calhoun concluded. If you actually read his work, his warning was much deeper and much more relevant to the world you live in right now. Calhoun did not believe that density alone killed the mice. He did not believe that comfort was the executioner. The killer was the death of purpose. Calhoun wrote that for a complex animal, a collapse is inevitable if the number of individuals capable of filling meaningful roles greatly exceeds the number of roles available. The mice didn't die because they were too close together. They died because they were no longer needed. The alphas had nothing to protect. The mothers had no safe space to nurture. The young had no frontiers to conquer. When the struggle was removed, the friction that generated their identity vanished. Now look around you. Look at the modern human world. We are the most comfortable humans who have ever lived. We have supercomputers in our pockets. We have global supply chains that deliver exotic foods to our doorsteps in minutes. We live in climate-controlled boxes, completely isolated from the brutal realities of the natural food chain. We built Universe 25. And look at what is happening to us. We are seeing a massive global retreat from societal roles. Record numbers of young adults are reporting unprecedented levels of isolation, anxiety, and depression. Birth rates are plummeting across the developed world. Look at the phenomenon of the hikikomori in Japan. Hundreds of thousands of young men who simply refuse to leave their bedrooms, opting out of work, dating, and society entirely. Look at the modern dating market, characterized by ghosting, apathy, and a paralyzing fear of vulnerability. Look at the endless hours spent scrolling through curated feeds on social media. We are surrounding ourselves with the human equivalent of the beautiful ones. Millions of people obsessed with crafting a perfectly groomed, flawless external image online, while totally retreating from the messy, painful, risky friction of real human connection. We are terrified of conflict. We are terrified of failure. We are terrified of the very struggles that are required to build a meaningful life. We are eating, sleeping, grooming our digital avatars, and slowly opting out of the species. It is easy to look at the data and feel a sense of impending doom. It is easy to believe that we are just biological machines trapped in a terrarium, waiting for the behavioral sink to consume us. But there is a crucial piece of the story that people always leave out. John Calhoun was not a pessimist. He spent the entire latter half of his career trying to figure out how to save the mice. He kept running experiments, trying to find the one variable that would allow a dense, comfortable population to survive. And he believed he found the answer. He believed he knew how humans could escape the fate of Universe 25. He called it ideational generativity. Mice are bound by physical space and biological roles. When those run out, they die. But humans have an entirely different dimension available to us. We have the mind. We have imagination. We have the ability to create entirely new roles that never existed before. When physical space contracts, we can expand into conceptual space. We can build art. We can explore science. We can form complex, overlapping communities based on shared ideas rather than shared geography. We don't have to just be hunters or defenders or mothers. We can be engineers, philosophers, storytellers, and explorers. We have the power to artificially generate our own friction. But we have to choose to do it. We have to actively reject the temptation of absolute comfort. We have to seek out challenges, take on responsibilities, and accept the pain of failure. We have to realize that the struggles we curse every day, the stress of building a career, the heartbreak of relationships, the exhausting work of raising a family, are not obstacles to a perfect life. They are the things keeping us alive. The Paradise Paradox is that the very utopia we have been striving for is a biological trap. A life with no friction is not a life at all. It is just a waiting room for the end. The mice in Universe 25 never had a choice. They were placed in a box, and their programming ran its fatal course. But you are not a mouse. You know the walls are there. The choice of what to do next is entirely up to you.